I spent 30 winters Boston docks, believing honest sweat could protect my family. But you can't save a daughter who hands your life's legacy to a snake.
Don't you dare bring those stinking, fish-salted work clothes anywhere near our wedding. The Prescott family has no room for low-class trash who will embarrass our name. Valen flicked a speck of dust off his tailored slacks, giving me a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. 30 years. 30 years of breaking my backloading cargo at the docks and pinching pennies at my corner market to give my daughter a future, only to be treated like garbage on her wedding day. But that slap in the face was nothing compared to the knife he drove straight into my spine. My store's tax ID was hijacked to smuggle toxic, contraband cosmetics, putting my late wife's only legacy under federal lock and key. And my own daughter, the girl I'd die for, had handed him the keys to destroy us. How do you survive when you're about to lose everything, and your own flesh and blood is holding the match? If you were in my boots, would you take this lying down, or would you take back what's yours? Hit subscribe to see how this fight ends, and tell me what you do in the comments below. 4:30 in the morning in South Boston is nothing but freezing wind off the harbor and the smell of rotten kelp. The ocean gale came howling up the narrow alleyway behind Doyle's Market, rattling the rusted sheet metal sign above the door. I hauled a 50-pound wooden crate of russet potatoes out of the back of the delivery van, my boots slipping slightly on the black ice coating the asphalt. My breath rose in thick white plumes under the yellow street lamp. My shoulder joints were aching from 30 years of dragging cargo on the docks before my back gave out, but this shop was all I had left. It was the only thing keeping me connected to Mary after she passed. I set the crate down on the sidewalk, wiping my nose with the back of my coarse canvas glove. My hands were permanently chapped, stained with dirt, and the faint, briny smell of salted cod. It was honest dirt. It paid the bills, even if those bills were getting heavier with each winter. At 7, the front bell chimed. Sloane walked in first, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. She was wearing a sleek, beige wool coat that looked too clean for Southie. Behind her was Valen, his leather shoes clicking sharply on the old linoleum floorboards. He was wearing a navy cashmere overcoat, his hair perfectly combed back, not a single strand out of place. He looked like he belonged on Beacon Hill, not in a corner grocery that sold 3-count bags of onions and pickled herring. "Morning, Sloane," I said, wiping my palms on my grease-splattered canvas apron. "Hi, Dad," Sloane said. She didn't step close enough to hug me. She just stood by the register, her eyes scanning the dusty shelves of canned beans and dry pasta with a faint flicker of embarrassment. "We brought the catering proofs for the rehearsal dinner. We wanted to run them by you." Valen didn't say good morning. He stood near the door, keeping his hands stuffed deep into his coat pockets. He sniffed the air once, his brow wrinkling in a quiet show of disgust. "Jesus, Iggy," he said, his voice smooth but carrying that razor-sharp bank officer edge. "Does the salt fish have to sit right by the front counter? It's 90% of the air quality in here. It clings to your clothes, man." "It's Doyle's Provisions, Valen," I said quietly. "It's been sitting there since my father ran the place. Docks are right down the street. People buy it." "Right, well, maybe we can move it to the back room when our guests start arriving from New York next week," Valen said, stepping forward. He reached out with 2 fingers, carefully adjusting a jar of honey on the shelf, as if it were a misplaced document on his desk. "Speaking of next week, Sloane mentioned you were planning on wearing your old Union Carhartt jacket to the rehearsal dinner at the Harbor Club." "It's cold on the water," I said. "That jacket is thick wool." "Dad, please," Sloane interrupted, her voice tight, pleading. "It's a formal dinner. Valen's parents are flying in. His father is a commercial developer. We want things to look nice. You can't show up smelling like kerosene and salted cod." "It's just one night." I looked at my daughter. I'd worked 18-hour shifts in the freezing hold of cargo ships so she could go to Boston College. I'd spent my retirement fund to buy her that wedding dress. Now, she was looking at me like I was a stray dog she had to keep from ruining her living room rug. I kept my mouth shut. I've learned that when you argue with a child who wants to play pretend, you only end up looking like the fool. I'll find a clean sweater, Sloane, I said. Great, Valen said, turning toward the door. We gotta run. I have a credit clearance meeting at the branch at 8. Let's go, Sloane. Sloane gave me a quick, apologetic nod and followed him out. The bell chimed, and then they were gone, leaving only the smell of Valen's expensive cologne lingering over the saltfish. At noon, the mail carrier slid a thick, registered envelope through the door slot. It was heavy white paper with a large crimson circular stamp at the top left. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Port of Boston. My fingers were clumsy as I tore the top off the envelope. Inside was an official notice of inspection and seizure. The header read, Doyle's Market, Employer Identification Number 04998-231D. I stared at the numbers. That was my tax ID. The EIN Mary and I had registered 30 years ago when we bought the building. According to the document, a commercial container number, CBP 9981TX, had been held at the South Boston terminal. The manifest, submitted electronically under my store's EIN, listed the cargo as 3 pallets of organic hand soap imported from Eastern Europe. But the physical inspection had found something else. 2,000 jars of skin-whitening creams containing active mercury compounds, a hazardous contraband substance prohibited by federal law. The letter stated that as the importer of record, Doyle's Market was facing a civil penalty of $50,000 pending a formal hearing and the potential of criminal smuggling charges. My stomach dropped, cold and heavy as a block of ice. Smuggling. Contraband. I'd never imported anything in my life. I bought my stock from local wholesale distributors in Chelsea. I didn't even have a computer in the store. I locked the front door of the shop, my hands shaking so hard I could barely turn the deadbolt. I walked down the narrow, creaking wooden stairs into the basement. The basement was damp, the old brick walls sweating under the low-hanging pipes. At the back, under a single dusty bulb, sat my old metal desk. I pulled open the bottom drawer. That's where I kept the green metal filing box containing our original incorporation papers, our deed, and our EIN certificates. The padlock on the green box was still in place, but when I picked it up, the key turned too easily. I opened the lid. The manila folders inside were jumbled. The folder labeled taxes was sitting at the front, not the back where I always kept it. The white sheet of paper with our EIN certificate was creased down the middle, as if it had been folded up, jammed into someone's pocket, and then stuffed back in a hurry. Sloane had the spare key to this basement. She used to come down here to help me with the inventory when she was in high school. I sat down in the rusted metal chair, the paper with the red CBP stamp trembling in my hand. I picked up the old landline phone on the desk and dialed Sloane's cell. It rang 4 times before she picked up. The background was noisy, filled with the clink of glasses and the low hum of voices. She was probably at a lunch meeting for her wedding coordination job. Dad, I'm kind of in the middle of something. Is it urgent? Sloane, did you give anyone the key to my basement office? There was a sudden, sharp silence on the other end of the line. The background noise seemed to fade as she stepped away from the crowd. What? Why are you asking me that? Sloane, did you give Valen the key? Dad, you're being ridiculous, she said, her voice dropping into a defensive, hurried whisper. Valen just needed to look at some old tax documents. He said, you were probably overpaying on your commercial property taxes because of some old business exemptions you didn't know about. He was trying to help you. He's a financial analyst, Dad. He understands these things. He took my EIN. Sloane, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of the betrayal. He used my store's tax ID to import a container of contraband cosmetics from Europe. The feds just seized the shipment. They're coming after the shop. There was a long gasp, then Sloane let out a sharp, angry breath. Are you crazy? Contraband? Valen is a professional, Dad. He doesn't deal with whatever garbage you're talking about. You probably just misread some stupid circular. You always get paranoid about these things because you don't understand how modern business works. I have the government letter right here in my hand. Sloane. Well, then it's a mistake. A banking error or something. Valen would never do anything to hurt us. Do you know how hard he's working to give me a life outside of that dump? Sloane, listen to me. No, you listen to me, Dad, she snapped, her voice shaking with a cold, vicious anger that made her sound like a stranger. Don't you dare do this. Don't you dare try to ruin my wedding and drag Valen's name through the mud just because you're jealous. You're jealous that he's successful, and you're still stuck in Southie smelling like salted fish. If you make a scene out of this, I swear to God, I will never speak to you again. The line went dead. I sat in the dark basement, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a hornet. The cold ocean wind rattled the pipes above my head, but all I could hear was my daughter's voice, telling me what I was worth. Al Kelly was sitting at the back booth of the L Street Diner, his hands wrapped around a thick ceramic mug of muddy coffee. The place smelled of burnt bacon fat, cheap floor wax, and the damp wool of shipyard workers' coats. Al had spent 30 years checking scales, fuel pumps, and import manifests for the city. He had a face like a weathered brick and eyes that didn't miss a dime on the sidewalk. I slid into the vinyl booth opposite him, my bad knee popping loud enough to hear over the sizzle of the grill. I didn't say a word. I just slid the crumpled paper with the Department of Homeland Security header across the sticky table. Al took a pair of wire-rimmed reading glasses from his flannel shirt pocket, slipped them on, and read the page twice. His jaw went tight, the small muscles near his ears twitching. Where'd you get this, Iggy? Came in the mail yesterday. CBP. They held a container at the terminal. He took a slow drag from his mug, his eyes still locked on the red circular stamp. CBP 9981TX. He ran a thick thumb over the number. This isn't some minor billing dispute, pal. This is a hazardous materials seizure. Mercury-laced skin creams. It's banned under federal law. It's the kind of poison they smuggle out of cheap labs in Eastern Europe to sell under the table in the city. The civil penalty is just the hook. If the feds think you brought this in on purpose, you're looking at a felony. I don't import anything, Al. You know that. I buy my potatoes from the terminal market and my canned goods from the distributor in Chelsea. I don't even have a computer in the shop. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a low, gravelly whisper. Somebody used your tax ID, Iggy. Your EIN is right there on the manifest. You don't just guess a 9-digit number like that. Whoever did this had your paperwork. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I looked out the diner window at the grey, slushy street. Sloane gave Valen the key to my basement office. She told me he wanted to help with my property taxes. Al let out a dry, sharp whistle. The banker kid. The one who looks like he's about to ask for your manager if you don't park his Audi fast enough. He took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Valen Prescott works commercial credit at the branch on Broadway. He's got the keys to the digital filing systems. And Declan Vane, you know Declan, right? Works the container yard at the Southie terminal. He's the guy who routes the trucks. If Valen used your tax ID to clear the paperwork, Declan is the one who'd make sure the container got lost in the shuffle so they could pull the pallets out before the customs inspectors got suspicious. Can you prove it, Al? Al stared at his coffee, then looked up, his eyes hard. Not from my kitchen table, Iggy. If the manifest went through on your EIN, you're the owner of record. If I go sniffing around the port database now, Declan's buddies will delete the logs before I can print them. We need something physical, something that proves they actually touched the goods. You got anything at the shop? I don't know. I came straight here. You go back. You look at every corner of that property. If Vane was moving pallets, He didn't do it with a handcart. He used a truck, and he did it when you weren't looking. Go. The rain had stopped by the time I got back to Doyle's Market, leaving the alley behind the shop slick and black. The harbour air was freezing, biting through my thin wool socks. I walked around the side of the brick building to the gravel lot where we keep the big green dumpster. Most people in Southie don't come back here. It's too narrow, just a dead-end spit of dirt and broken asphalt between my wall and the old warehouse next door. I stopped near the wooden loading dock. In the middle of the patch of wet clay by the rain barrel, there were two deep, parallel ruts. They weren't from my Ford. These were heavy, dual-axle tire tracks. The tread was wide, commercial grade, the kind they use on 12-foot box trucks. The clay was still soft, the edges of the tire marks sharp and fresh, which meant whatever made them had been back here within the last 48 hours. I bent down, my bad back catching with a dull ache, and ran my hand near the ruts. There was a smell. It wasn't the usual scent of rotten cabbage or damp cardboard from the dumpster. It was sharp, chemical, like sulfur mixed with cheap almond soap. It made my eyes water. Near the steps of the loading dock sat 3 empty wooden pallets, their pine slats clean and new, completely different from the grey, weathered wood I used for my vegetable crates. The stencil on the side of the pallets was still bright blue, made in Poland. Doyle's Provisions. They had actually used my name. They'd printed labels with my store's logo to mask the crates of poison. Valen hadn't just stolen my paper identity. He had turned my actual store into a drop house. I stood up, my knees cracking like pistol shots in the quiet alley. My daughter's face flashed in my mind. "You're just jealous because he's successful, Dad." My hands were trembling as I unlocked the back door of the store and went inside. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want the neighbors seeing me moving through the dark. I went down the cellar stairs, my hand sliding along the damp brick wall. The basement was cold, the air thick with the smell of old stone and grease. In the corner of my small basement office next to the rusted boiler sat a heavy green steel cabinet. It had a mechanical combination lock on the door, a solid piece of American iron from 1950. Valen had laughed when he saw it. He'd told Sloane that people in the real world used digital clouds, not green boxes that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard. But a digital cloud can be wiped with a keystroke from an office on the 20th floor. A green steel cabinet requires a crowbar and a lot of noise. I spun the dial. Left to 24, right to 12, left to 58. The heavy latch clicked, and the door swung open with a low metallic groan. Inside, tucked behind 3 decades of paper ledger books, was my old analog security recorder, a grey Panasonic VHS deck from 1998. It was hooked up to 2 small black and white dome cameras I'd mounted under the eaves of the roof back when the neighborhood was rougher. The digital cameras Valen wanted me to buy had wireless connections that went through the shop's non-existent internet. My cameras ran on coax cable, feeding directly into black magnetic tape under my feet. I pressed the eject button. The machine whirred, clicked, and spat out a heavy black cassette labeled November 12, November 19. My hands were clumsy as I slid the tape into the small monitor sitting on the desk. I turned the dial, the screen flickering to life with static before settling into a grainy, wide-angle view of the back alley. I pressed the fast-forward button. The digital clock in the corner of the screen sped through the hours. 10 o'clock p.m., 11:30 p.m., 1 o'clock a.m. At 2:14 a.m. on November 12th, the screen flickered. A pair of bright headlights appeared at the edge of the alley, cutting through the thick Portland fog. A white, unmarked box truck backed slowly into the frame, its rear tires churning up the wet clay near the loading dock. The driver's door opened. A big man in a grease-stained high-vis vest got out. Declan Vane. I knew his heavy, lumbering walk from the docks. He walked to the back of the truck and slid the roll-up door open. Then, the passenger door opened. A man stepped into the yellow glare of the street lamp. He was wearing an expensive dark overcoat and leather gloves. Valen. He stood near the truck, his hands in his pockets, his head turning as he looked up at the brick walls. He looked impatient, checking his gold watch twice under the light. Vane started dragging the wooden pallets to the edge of the truck bed, sliding them onto my loading dock. They were the same clean pine pallets I'd just found outside. On the side of each crate, the blue stenciled letters were clear even on the grainy tape, Doyle's Provisions. Valen stepped closer, pointing at one of the boxes, saying something to Vane. Vane laughed, spitting a dark stream of tobacco juice onto my gravel before sliding the truck door shut. They were using my store as a temporary holding pen. They'd bring the stuff in after hours, store it in my back shed, and then Valen would coordinate the buyers from his bank desk, using my clean reputation to mask the stench of his dirty margins. I sat back in the metal chair, the cold metal biting through my pants. The black and white screen showed my son-in-law to be laughing, slapping Vane on the back before they got back into the cab and drove away. My daughter was going to marry this man. She was going to stand in a white dress in front of 300 people and swear her life to a thief who had set her father up to take a federal fall. My grip tightened around the plastic edges of the VHS cassette. This was the proof. This was the hammer that would smash Valen's pretty world to pieces. Suddenly, the monitor screen went static. Above my head, through the thick oak joists of the ceiling, I heard a sound, a sharp, metallic click. The front deadbolt of the shop was turning. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I hadn't left the door unlocked. I'd turned the key myself when I came in. The heavy front door of the market opened, the tinny brass bell letting out a quick, muffled chime. Then, the door closed. Footsteps moved across the linoleum floorboards directly above my head. They weren't the heavy, clunky thuds of work boots. These were light, fast, and sharp. Leather soles, expensive Oxfords. The footsteps stopped right at the top of the cellar stairs. The old wooden door creaked as it was pushed open, and a sliver of yellow light from the shop upstairs cut through the darkness of the stairwell. Iggy? Valen's voice drifted down the stairs, smooth, polite, and completely cold. You down there, old man? I saw your truck out front. We need to talk about those taxes. I jammed the heavy black plastic tape into the deep pocket of my work jacket, the sharp corners biting hard into my ribs. I grabbed a rusted crescent wrench from the metal desk, dropped to my good knee, and pressed my shoulder against the cold brick wall by the main water valve. The pipe was dry, but I smeared a smudge of black grease across my knuckles just as the cellar steps groaned under Valen's expensive leather soles. Valen, down here. I'm near the boiler. I didn't look up. I tapped the metal valve with the wrench, making a dull, clinking sound that echoed in the dark. Valen stopped on the last step, his leather shoes clicking sharply as he stepped around a puddle of rusty water. He pulled a silk handkerchief from his breast pocket, dabbed his nose, and looked around the damp cellar with a faint sneer. I saw your truck out front, Iggy. You shouldn't be working in the dark like this. It's bad for the eyes, and honestly, that leg of yours looks like it's about to give out. I manage, Valen. What brings you down to Southie on a Tuesday night? Don't you have credit files to push at the bank? He smiled, but his eyes stayed flat and restless. He tapped a pristine white envelope against his leather gloves. Sloane told me you were worried about the business taxes. I told her I'd handle it. In fact, I brought you a little head start. 5 grand. Cash. I slowly pushed myself up, leaning my weight against the damp brick. My knee felt like it was full of broken glass. Why would you give me 5 grand, Valen? Let's call it a gesture of goodwill, Iggy. Sloane wants this wedding to be perfect, and honestly, I want to help you fix this dump up. Get some new signage. Clean up the back alley. But I need you to do me a small favor first. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his cashmere coat. Just a standard digital authorization for the warehouse space in the back. Just sign here. It lets my branch run an electronic audit on the store's assets. Standard banking procedure. I wiped my greasy hand on my canvas apron, leaving a long black streak. I didn't reach for his gold pen. I don't sign anything without reading it first, Valen. And I don't do digital. I'm a paper and ink man. The polite smile slipped off his face, just a fraction, leaving his mouth a hard, straight line. Come on, Iggy. Don't be difficult. It's a simple form. I'm trying to bail you out here. $5,000 pays off a big chunk of your roof mortgage. Sloan told me about the 15 grand you owe. You think I don't know you're drowning? My debts are my business, Valen. I'll have my lawyer look over this form tomorrow. Valen took a step closer, his eyes turning dead and cold. He didn't look like the polite banker anymore. You don't have a lawyer, Iggy, and you don't have time. If you don't sign this tonight, I call off the wedding. I'll tell Sloan you're trying to ruin her life because you're bitter. She'll hate you, Iggy. She'll never step foot in this market again. Is that what you want? I looked at him, my knuckles white around the heavy steel wrench. I wanted to smash his perfect teeth in. But I didn't. I kept my voice quiet. Get out of my cellar, Valen. He stared at me for 3 long seconds, his breath rising in the cold air. Then he shoved the pen and the envelope back into his pocket. Have it your way, old man, but you're playing a losing hand. He turned and went up the stairs, his shoes clicking fast and angry against the wood until the door slammed shut upstairs. The next morning was even colder. I met Al Kelly behind the old fish packing plant near the harbour. The wind was whipping snow flurries across the grey, choppy water. Al handed me a manila folder, his gloved hand shaking slightly from the chill. I got the digital port logs, Iggy, CBP database. The import declaration for that container was filed from a secure terminal at Valen's bank branch. But here's the kicker. He opened the folder, pointing to a printed page. The electronic signature on the declaration. It says Ignatius Doyle, but look at the font. It's a digital signature block. The system generated it using a standard bank font file. You ever sign anything with a computer? Iggy, never. I don't even know how to turn one of those things on. Exactly. He used your tax ID and forged a digital signature from his own desk. He thought you'd never see it because CBP notifications usually go to a digital email. He didn't realize the Port Authority still sends paper backups to old-school registered businesses. He made a sloppy mistake. Where's the container now? Still held at the terminal. They're doing a full chemical analysis. But Valen is panicking. He's got 80 grand in margin debt that's about to default. If that shipment gets seized permanently, he's finished. He's going to try to move the stuff from your back shed before the feds come looking. Keep your eyes open, Iggy. I spent the afternoon sitting in my truck down the street from the old port registration office on Northern Avenue. The building was just a rusted, double-wide trailer sitting on a gravel lot near the container stacks. At 3, Valen's silver Audi pulled up. He got out, his coat collar turned up against the wind, and slammed the door. He walked into the trailer. I slipped out of my cab, my knee throbbing with every step, and crept along the side of the trailer. The metal siding was cold as ice. There was a small, grimy window near the back, covered in sea salt. I pressed my ear against the glass. Inside, the heater was rattling, but I could hear the voices clear over the hum of the fan. I told you to clear the damn manifest, Declan, Valen was shouting, his voice tight and hysterical. The feds are doing a random check on the chemical levels. If they find the mercury, it's a federal rap. Don't yell at me, you little punk. Declan Vane's voice came back, heavy and gravelly. I did my job. I routed the container to the buy. I even helped you move the first 3 pallets to the old man's shed. If you messed up the HS codes on the digital declaration, that's on you. We need to get the rest of the crates out of the port tonight. My buyers are waiting. I have to pay off the margin call by Friday or the bank will audit my personal accounts. They'll see the transactions, Declan. Are you stupid? The gate is locked down. CBP has a watch on that container now. If I touch it, I lose my job. I go to Union Prison. We have the old man's tax ID. If they trace it, it goes to Doyle's Market. Iggy Doyle is the one who imports the goods, not us. He's a 60-year-old Bok-Vac, Declan. The feds will think he's just a dumb smuggler. We walk away clean. Listen to me, you slick bastard. There was a loud scraping sound, like a heavy metal chair being thrown back. I pressed my face closer to the salt-crusted glass. Through the dirt, I saw Declan Vane's massive, grease-stained hand reach out. He grabbed Valen by the lapels of his $3,000 cashmere coat, slamming him hard against the metal wall of the trailer. Valen's gold watch clattered against the desk as he tried to pull away, his face twisted in pure terror. If this shipment gets locked down, I'm telling them, you're the one who used Old Man Doyle's tax ID to forge the clearance documents. Then you and your woman both go to prison. I stood by the front counter of the market, the smell of damp pine and cold wax rising from the floorboards. Sloane was pacing near the bread rack, her leather boots clicking a frantic, irregular beat. I had the printed CBP manifest laid flat on the wood, my thumb resting over our store's EIN. Sloane, look at the page. Just look at the damn numbers. That's our business tax ID. He took it right out of the filing box in the cellar. She didn't look. She kept her eyes on the street outside, her fingers twisting the gold band of her engagement ring. Dad, you're doing it again. You're spinning some crazy story because you can't stand the fact that Valen is putting us on a different level. He's a VP of credit, for God's sake. Why would he care about your little tax number? Because his bank terminal is the one that filed the digital declaration, Sloane. Al Kelly ran the port logs. Valen used this store as a shield to bring in 3 pallets of banned mercury creams from Europe. He's 90 grand in the hole on margin calls, and he's using my name to pull himself out of the mud. Sloane turned on me, her eyes flashing with a cold, desperate anger that made her look like a complete stranger. Stop it! Just stop. You've been looking for a reason to hate him since the day we met. You hate him because he has clean hands. You hate him because he doesn't spend his life hauling boxes of rotten cabbage in the freezing cold. He's trying to give me a life in Beacon Hill, Dad. A real life. Not this damp grave of a store. I looked at my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders through the Southie blizzards. The girl whose BC tuition I'd paid by working double shifts until my knees were swollen twice their size. He's setting us up, Sloane. If the feds come, they don't go to Beacon Hill. They come here. They come to me. Then let them, she screamed, her voice cracking in the quiet shop. Valen said you'd try to do this. He said you'd get paranoid and try to claw us back down to your level. Well, I'm not staying, Dad. If you try to ruin this wedding, if you go to the police with these fake papers, I swear to God, I'm gone. You won't see me at Thanksgiving. You won't see me ever again. She snatched her purse off the counter, her shoulder hitting the bread rack as she spun around. The bell chimed loud and sharp as she slammed the door behind her, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of the old milk fridge. 3 hours later, the blue lights came. They didn't use sirens. They didn't need to. 3 unmarked Ford Explorers just pulled up onto the slushy curb right in front of Doyle's Market, their strobes painting the brick walls in cold, rhythmic flashes. 2 men in heavy dark windbreakers with US Customs and Border Protection stenciled on the back walked in, followed by a woman from the State Treasury. She had a clipboard in her hand and a roll of heavy yellow tape under her arm. Ignatius Doyle? She asked, her voice flat, official, completely empty of any neighborly warmth. Yes, we have a warrant to seize the premises and all digital and physical business records under federal asset forfeiture guidelines, she said, sliding a folded paper across the counter. Doyle's Market is being held in connection with an ongoing smuggling investigation. Step away from the register, sir. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I'd seen enough docks raids in my 30 years to know that arguing with a badge is like shouting at the tide. I slowly took off my canvas apron, folded it neatly on the counter, and picked up my keys. Outside, the neighborhood was already watching. Old Mrs. Callahan was leaning out her second-story window across the street, her bathrobe pulled tight against the chill. Two Bok Vac from the Union Hall stood by the corner, their hands in their pockets, staring at the yellow tape being stretched across my front glass. Doyle's Market, sealed by the United States government. 30 years of honest sweat, wrapped in plastic ribbon in 5 minutes. By 5 in the afternoon, I was sitting in Al Kelly's kitchen. The house was quiet, smelling of stale tea and old newspapers. Al was on the phone with a buddy of his from the Harbour Merchants Association, his pencil scratching furiously on a yellow legal pad. He hung up, took off his reading glasses, and looked at me. His face was grey. "Iggy, it's worse than we thought." I took a slow sip of my tea. It was lukewarm and bitter. "Tell me." I had my guy check the corporate registry for the shell company Valen set up. The one that imported the Polish container. It's registered under the name Doyle's Provisions LLC. He slid a document across the table. Valen didn't just use your Ein, Iggy. He had Sloan register the LLC as the sole owner. And he had her sign a bridge loan guarantee. "A what?" "A personal guarantee," Al said, his voice dropping. To get the cash from the private lenders to buy the shipment, they needed a physical backer. Valen told Sloan it was just a standard wedding expense document. She signed an unconditional guarantee for $100,000. Personal liability. My chest went tight, like an iron band was being bolted around my ribs. "What does that mean, Al?" "It means if the feds seize that container permanently, the cargo is gone. The buyers won't pay. The lenders will call the debt immediately. And since Sloan's name is on that guarantee, they'll go after her for every single penny. They'll garnish her salary, seize her accounts, and put her in a federal courtroom as the primary debtor. She's the meat shield, Iggy. Valen is completely insulated on paper. If the ship sinks, she's the one who drowns." I stood up, the tea mug rattling against the saucer. The room felt freezing cold. My own daughter. He'd wrapped her in a $100,000 shroud of debt and set her up to take the fall for his margins. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a blocked number. No name. Just 10 digits. I pulled it out, my thumb slipping twice on the cold screen before I got it to my ear. "Doyle?" The voice was heavy, rough, wet, with the phlegm of a man who smoked 2 packs of Luckies a day. Declan Vane. "I'm here, Vane. You got that VHS tape, don't you? The one from the 12th. The old school camera tape." I didn't say anything. I could hear the wind howling through the phone, the distinct, metallic rattle of container cranes in the background. "Listen to me, old man," Vane growled, his voice dropping into a harsh, freezing whisper. "Valen is a coward. He's currently locked in his apartment crying like a baby because the feds sealed your shop. But I don't go to jail for a banker's mistake. You have until 8 o'clock tonight. What do you want, Vane?" "Warehouse 9, the old coal terminal. You bring the original VHS tape and the player, and you hand them over to me. You do that. And maybe I don't tell the customs investigators that your daughter was the one who authorized the container routing. She didn't know anything about it. Doesn't matter what she knew, Doyle. Her name is on the LLC. Her signature is on the manifest. If I tell the feds she was the mastermind, she's the one who gets the handcuffs before sunrise. You bring the tape to Warehouse 9, alone. You got that?" The line went dead. I looked at the window. The snow was starting to fall now, thick, heavy flakes clinging to the black glass of Al's kitchen. Al looked at me, his hand reaching for his car keys. "Iggy, don't do it. We can call Ross." I pulled the black VHS tape from my coat pocket. It was heavy, cold, and solid. "No," I said, my voice quiet as the snow outside. "He's got my daughter, Al. I'm going to the harbour." The wet Boston snow was coming down in thick, blinding sheets, plastering itself against the windshield of my old Ford. I sat in the idling cab, the heater blowing a dry, dusty warmth over my frozen knuckles. On the seat beside me, the black plastic casing of the original VHS tape looked cold and heavy. Al Kelly was leaning over the console, his hand resting flat on my arm. He looked tired, the deep lines around his eyes shadowed by the dashboard. Lights. "You don't have to walk into that warehouse, Iggy," Al said, his voice a low rumble. "I've already got the duplicate tape and the forensic signature files over to Detective Ross. The CBP units are moving in. Just let them handle the heavy lifting." I looked through the swiping windshield wipers at the distant, rusted silhouette of Warehouse 9. The old coal terminal looked like a giant, rotting tooth sticking out of the black water of the harbour. "She's my daughter, Al," I said, shifting the truck into gear. "If she's going to see the world fall apart tonight, she's going to see her father standing there to catch her." I pulled my canvas work jacket tight around my neck, grabbed the heavy duffel bag from the floor, and stepped out into the freezing wind. The salt air bit into my face, sharp and bitter. Every step across the icy gravel of the dock was a chore, my bad knee screaming with a dull, wet ache. But I kept my head down, marching through the slush until I reached the rusted iron door of the terminal. The door wasn't locked. It creaked open, groaning on its salt-rusted hinges, letting me into a vast, cavernous dark that smelled of wet coal dust and dead fish. A single yellow halogen bulb hung from a steel girder 50 feet up, casting a sickly circle of light on the concrete floor. In the middle of that light stood Declan Vane. He was wearing his heavy dock union vest, a half-burned Lucky Strike dangling from his lip. Beside him was Valen, his navy cashmere overcoat ruined with grey slush, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked frantic, his fingers twitching against his thighs. And then there was Sloane. She was sitting on an empty wooden pallet, her beige coat stained with black grease. She was shivering, her hands tucked deep into her pockets, her eyes red and wide, with a terror I'd never seen in her before. "You brought it?" Valen shouted, his voice echoing shrilly in the empty metal warehouse. "Tell me you brought the tape, Iggy." I set the heavy canvas duffel bag down on a rusted oil drum. I looked at my girl. "Sloane," I said softly. "Dad," Sloane whispered, her lips blue from the cold. Valen said, "We were just borrowing the tax number. He said it was just a technicality for the bank. I didn't know about the creams, Dad. I swear I didn't know it was poison." "I know, baby," I said. "I know. Don't play the saint now, Doyle." Vane barked, spitting his cigarette butt into the dark. "We don't have time for a family reunion. The feds are crawling all over the terminal. Give me the tape and the machine, or your little girl is going to be the one signing the arrest sheet." "Her name is on the LLC papers, old man. She's the importer of record." Valen stepped forward, his eyes wild and desperate, reaching out toward my duffel bag. "Just give it to him, Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "It's over anyway. The bank is already running a personal audit on my accounts. If we don't get Vane his clearance tape, we're all going down. You're 58, Iggy. You've had your life. Your store is a dump anyway. Let it go. Let me save Sloane." "You didn't want to save Sloane, Valen," I said, keeping my voice dead and steady. "You wanted a shield. You had her register Doyle's Provisions LLC, so your bank terminal wouldn't show up on the customs wire. You had her sign a $100,000 personal guarantee for the bridge loan, so the private lenders would come after her when the container got seized." Valen's face went completely white. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, rattling gasp came out. Sloane looked up at him, her jaw trembling, her voice barely a breath. "Valen? Is that true? It was a business structure, Sloane?" Valen stammered, his hands waving in the air as if he were trying to push the words back into his mouth. "It was just to defer the tax liabilities. I was going to pay off the lenders the second the cosmetic shipment cleared. We were going to buy the house in Beacon Hill. I did it for us." "You did it for your margin debt," I said. I unzipped the duffel bag, pulled out a small portable television VCR combo, and plugged it into a temporary generator outlet on the pillar behind me. I slid the black tape into the slot. The machine hummed, clicked, and the small screen flickered to grainy life. Black and white. November 12th, 2 in the morning. The screen showed Valen and Vane standing on my loading dock, laughing under the yellow light, sliding pallets of mercury-laced cream into my back shed. "Finch had his logs, Vane," I said, pointing at the screen. But he didn't have the tape. This runs on a closed coaxial loop. No cloud, no digital wipes, just magnetic tape. Declan Vane stared at the tiny screen, his face turning the color of old iron. He lunged forward, his heavy hand reaching for the television. Delete it! Delete the damn thing! He didn't make it 3 steps. The heavy iron doors of the warehouse blew open with a deafening bang. The darkness was suddenly filled with the blinding glare of high-powered flashlights and the red and blue strobes of police cruisers. Federal agents! Keep your hands where we can see them. The shouts echoed like gunshots in the empty space. Declan Vane tried to turn toward the back wharf, but 2 plainclothes officers tackled him into the wet coal dust, his face slamming hard against the concrete. Varlan didn't run. He just dropped to his knees, his hands trembling behind his head, crying softly as the steel cuffs clicked around his wrists. I walked over to Sloane, my bad leg dragging heavily, and pulled her off the wooden pallet. She buried her face in my sallow canvas jacket, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry," she wept. I held her tight, staring over her shoulder at the flashing blue lights. The feds had their crooks, but as Al Kelly stepped through the door with a grim look on his face, I knew the real bill was about to come due. The private lenders didn't care about Valen's arrest. They had Sloane's signature on a $100,000 guarantee, and the feds had officially seized the Polish container. The debt was dry, cold, and immediate. I made the only choice a father could make. I liquidating Doyle's market. I sold the building, the shelves, the old registers, and every square inch of the brick walls Mary and I had painted 30 years ago. I drained my union pension to the very last cent to pay off the civil fines and clear Sloane's name so she wouldn't have a federal record hanging over her head. Now, I live in a tiny 15-square-foot room overlooking the shipyard docks. The walls are thin, the heater clanks all night, and my right knee is permanently stiff because I couldn't afford the surgery. Sloane left Boston 3 months ago. She was too ashamed to look at me, too broken to stay in Southie. I don't blame her. Sometimes the truth is a mirror that's just too hard to look into. If there's one piece of advice an old dock worker can give you, it's this: don't let your love for your children make you blind to their rot. If you see a leak in the foundation, don't just patch it up with tape because you're scared of the mess. You let the pipe burst. You let the truth wash away the dirt, even if it leaves you standing in the cold, completely empty-handed. Because at the end of the day, a man's house can be sold, but his dignity belongs to him alone. I want to say a deep, heartfelt thank you to every single one of you who has watched my story and stood by me through this storm. Your kind words in the comments have been the only warmth in this cold room. If you believe that a father's honor is worth more than any bank account, please hit that subscribe button, share this video, and let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in my boots? Keep your chin up, and I'll see you in the next chapter.